Hello everyone, and welcome back to Nintendo Everything Refresh, episode 16, hosted by your friends over here at nintendoeverything.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're coming back at you every week with what is new and exciting in the world of Nintendo, and this week we are joined by Dennis Gagliardato.
Hello, hello.
Nicholas Shade.
Hello everyone.
And not Louise Estrella. Louise Estrella is not here. Sorry, I wanted to pull a fast one on you guys, but no, Louise will be back next week. And Louise edits the podcast every week for us, so really it's like he's always here with us.
Very true.
All right, so we've got quite a bit to talk about in this show. We're going to kick things off, well, just coming up later on in the show, I guess I should say. We do have some news about E3 that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about the recent Nintendo investor meeting. A lot of really interesting tidbits came out of that. Some kind of funny stuff, too. And then we're going to talk about some games. First one being Robocop Rouge City. This was something that was actually announced a little while ago, but we got a first real look at the game this past week as part of a Nacon presentation. For those of you who don't know, Nacon is a games publisher. They publish things like the WRC games. They're publishing a bunch of upcoming games that are not coming to Switch. They're also publishing Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown, which is like totally off on a tangent, but I'm very excited for that game. It was announced for the Switch as well, but we haven't heard anything about it really, so not sure if it's still coming. But anyways, Robocop Rouge City. If you guys haven't seen this game, it's pretty impressive, and I'm not really sure how it's going to run on the Switch, but this is a Robocop-themed first-person shooter that is also promising to let you explore Detroit. I'm not sure if it's open world or not. They haven't really talked about that, but they say you'll be able to explore Detroit. They show off some melee combat as well. It looks, in my opinion, I mean, pretty faithful to the movie. Have you guys seen the original Robocop movie?
It's been forever, but yes.
Yeah, it's a classic. I'm surprised it took this long to make a big budget Robocop game, to be honest.
It's true. I mean, it's. I think everyone's like heard of RoboCop too, but it's weird that, something as well known as it hasn't been used more, right? Because I feel like we've seen Terminator left and right. Meanwhile, RoboCop has just kind of been, sitting on the benches for forever, right? I mean, we've seen him now probably in recent memory in Mortal Kombat, but other than that, you don't really see, that property being used elsewhere.
Right. Okay, and here's what's really crazy. So the original Robocop movie came out in 1987, and apparently they got back the original actor, Peter Weller, to play Robocop in this game too. So it seems like they're really pulling out all the stops for the Robocop fans.
See, that's awesome. I love that because it's kind of similar to like Evil Dead, right? Where it's hard to imagine Evil Dead without Bruce Campbell, right? So I'm happy that they do stuff like that.
And Dennis, it's funny that you should mention there being Terminator games, because if I recall correctly, the studio working on this game also released a Terminator first-person shooter a few years back, I think.
Oh, wow.
Called Terminator Resistance.
Okay.
That was very well received. Surprisingly, very well received, had like a really solid story, and was just a very good game overall. So I guess that's why they were put on this Robocop project.
That makes sense.
I think furthermore, they also have another Terminator game coming up that's like Terminator Survival Project, I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that one doesn't have a name, but it seems to be more like a survival-focused Terminator game, which that sounds cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's clear that just judging from what you said, Nicholas, and just how this one's looking, this Robocop game's looking, I think this is a studio that's not just comprised of game developers, but also people who really love movies, and they're very passionate about some of these more iconic franchises, which is great because that means they're fans. And I think, when you have fans themselves developing a game, I think more often than not, you're going to expect something or have something that's going to be pretty well done. I mean, look at Sonic Mania. That's a great example, and Streets of Rage 4, done by fans as well. So.
Right. I'm looking at the trailer for this game. I mean, we've talked about how faithful it looks, but my first thought when I saw this trailer was, even though we're seeing a lot of combat in this game, for some reason it was giving me Deus Ex vibes. And I'm not sure if that's because of like the little exploration they showed of the city. I wonder if there's any stealth to this game. I don't remember there being a lot of like sneaking around in RoboCop. I mostly just remember it being very, very violent. But
Kind of hard, yeah.
Yeah.
Big footsteps.
He's pretty tanky.
Yeah. How do you guys think this is gonna run on the Switch?
I don't think it will. I think it's just
No.
but thankfully, through the power of the cloud, I think that's how it might, But I mean, again, that remains to be seen. But we'll see.
You're waiting on that cloud version announcement.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing when they said, Guardians of the Galaxy was coming to Switch. At the same time, they showed the trailer for all the other platforms, and I'm like, okay, all right, yeah, sure, if you say so,
Right.
But
It is
Yeah, I
definitely
mean,
a big question because everything, like the game was mostly shown as being a PS5 title, I think, at first. The initial trailer showed it being for PS5, so it having a Switch version is particularly odd. And the cloud version does seem likely, but I feel like every single time a game on Switch that was a cloud version has been announced, it's been announced as a cloud version.
Right.
Maybe I'm mistaken on that, but I feel like that has been the case. Maybe it's like a contractual thing or something. But it does make me wonder if maybe this is just going to be a heavily downgraded port, which I suppose would be better.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it depends, like, maybe they've outsourced the Switch port to a different studio or something, but, I mean, first-person shooters on the Switch tend to do okay. I mean, Doom, 2016 and Doom Eternal were not perfect ports by any means, but, they ran on the Switch, and they were able to maintain, solid frame rate. Not a full 60 frames, I don't think, but the fact that those games work, and not to mention, we mentioned this a couple episodes ago, but Bright Memory Infinite, which is also a very graphically impressive first-person shooter, is also coming to Switch. So, I don't know. I think there could be hope for this.
I think, at the end of the day, it all comes down to optimization, right? And some studios are better at doing that than others, right? But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's not the first time we've seen it with Doom, with Wolfenstein, and, but there's been so many impressive ports also, like Alien Isolation, like Hellblade, where it's like, how is this even... With The Witcher 3, I think, being a classic example, too, where it's like, the downgrades are obviously there, but, hey, I mean, it's playable. It's perfectly playable, which is the most impressive part.
It's an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, I'm very excited for this game. I don't think I'll be picking it up on Switch, to be totally honest.
No,
I know that's blasphemy, but I'm like, man, if I'm going to play this Robocop game, I want to play it on the biggest screen possible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it feels like it's built for.
For me, this is either going to be either a PC game or an Xbox game, because it's going to be, very cinematic and very in your face. So I want that graphical fidelity as well. I don't want something like that in a handheld mode. I just don't.
Right. Well, so Robocop Rouge City, that is penciled in for June of next year. So a little ways to wait, but plenty of time for them to hopefully get it optimized and working the best it can on the Switch. And I guess I just also mentioned, they say it's a brand new story, so it's not a recap of the movies, so that's kind of cool. All right, so this is just a weird story. So you guys might already know, last week Nintendo announced that there is a new Nintendo Switch OLED model coming. It is a Splatoon 3 design version, so it's same Switch OLED but with Splatoon 3 decals and kind of aesthetic to it. The Joy-Cons are different colors than we've seen. They're kind of like it's kind of like a purple and blue on one side, and then on the other side it's like a yellow, but it's got this really cool print overlay. I mean, looks really good. We don't see a lot of these limited edition Switches.
Yeah, not anymore. Not compared to 3DSs. I feel like every month they had a new sort of 3DS, But with the Switches by comparison...
The new 3DS.
Oh, yeah, and the new 3DS, as well, yeah. Interestingly, I don't know if you guys remember the Minecraft one, but that one for some reason was Japan only. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a Minecraft one.
The Minecraft Switch?
No. The Minecraft new 3DS, or rather new 2DS XL.
Oh, okay.
To be exact. But it was a beautiful
face, I think.
Yeah. It was a beautiful looking 2DS, but for some reason, Japan only. Considering Minecraft is this globally known, product and was made in the West. So it's weird that something like that was Japan only. But it was many crazy limited editions that we don't really see too much of now compared to.
Yeah, I think this is the first special OLED model we've seen, which I guess, it's only been out for a year, but still, it's kind of funny to think about. This model itself, I have to say, there's a lot of stuff plastered on it. I don't know if I'm as much of a fan of that. I will say that I absolutely love the Joy-Con like gradient colors. Those look really nice, and I hope they use that idea for more either special editions or just, Joy-Con you can buy separately, because I think those look really nice.
Yeah, I wish we would see like the actual Switch unit itself, like the actual tablet portion. I wish we would see them like that in a different color, because we've really only ever seen that in black. Like they'll put like graphics or whatever on the back of it, but they went all out with the other colors and stuff. So I don't know. It felt like maybe a missed opportunity there, but yeah. Okay, so here's what's funny about this. So like the night before this console was announced, there was a lot of buzz on the internet. I guess a lot of rumors. Because rumors on the internet, that never happens. But thanks in no small part to a certain YouTube channel that will not be named, there was a lot of hype about that, Nintendo set some of their trailers to private, and in the past when they've done this, in the past when they've made these trailers private, they've announced some kind of new console. Maybe it's the Switch Pro, and then people on Twitter were all excited, like, "Oh, the Switch Pro's coming tomorrow," and we did not get that, needless to say.
No. I mean, it is, I also don't know how accurate that necessarily was in the first place, because if I recall correctly, what they're referring to is the Switch Lite video model, or, video being privated around the time that the OLED was announced. But if I recall correctly, that video was privated 2 days after the OLED was announced. So it doesn't quite fit compared to this one, where it was privated, a day or two before?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Nicholas, there's a lot of things I keep track of in this world, but when Nintendo sets their trailers to private is not one of them,
That's true. I just saw people online mentioning it, but yeah.
But yeah, no, there are people out there. It's just kind of funny. And then, someone even, I guess someone who used to work at Nintendo, I think actually it might have been Kit,
I think it was Kit and
Chris, the duo.
Yeah.
He said something along the lines of like, "Oh, well, it could just be because the actors in these trailers, like they have licensing agreements that need to be renewed, so they set the trailers to private or take them down or whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense. That makes more sense than not just uploading a new trailer." But
one thing that I did see about that's kind of interesting is that supposedly there's this one guy on a forum, I think it's a Chinese forum, that leaked exactly what this edition was going to be. The fact that this was going to be a Splatoon 3 Special Edition several days early, but along with the specific date and time that the tweet would go up. And this is apparently the same guy that has leaked I think it was a Switch Lite backplate before the Switch Lite was announced. So I think it's some kind of factory worker that apparently has an in into
that's some hard-hitting
stuff. Yeah, and the same guy also said that apparently, rumors, so obviously mileage may vary, there's going to be some announcement of a new model of Switch, like some kind of actually new model with new specs later this year for a release early next year.
Oh, okay.
That, rumors obviously, but
rumors
would be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, as I don't really read Chinese forums, but maybe I should. This is what you're telling me. This is where all the breaking news is happening.
It's the place. That's where I am every Sunday morning. I make a cup of coffee and I'm on the Chinese forums, just perusing around for any leaks.
The place to be.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's gonna take more. I love that they're making these collector's editions, but it's gonna take more than a decorative upgrade like this to get me to upgrade, because I don't know about you guys, but I just upgraded my launch day Switch to the OLED version earlier this year. So I would have been really upset if it had been a Switch Pro.
Well, I got one for Christmas.
Kicking myself.
So I'm
there you go.
Yeah, so even though it wasn't even though it's a little further back than you, I feel the same way. Let's hold on, let's slow down a little bit.
Right. At least let me get a year of use out of this thing before I have to somehow justify to myself spending another $400.
Right.
Yeah. Personally, I've still been hanging on to my Model 1 Switch from 3 days after launch, so I will not mind an eventual upgrade.
True.
Yeah, no, there's something to be said for that, especially because if you're into the homebrew scene, those are pretty much the only ones that can ever be modded.
True.
Like whenever Nintendo, they like revised the Switch model back in like 2018, like a year after launch, it was like that small revision that like upgraded the battery life. You can't like jailbreak those Switches anymore.
Yeah.
So there's a pretty big market out there for those launch day Switches. You're sitting on some gold there.
Yeah, I mean, even before like the Model 2 was released, I think some of the later versions of the Model 1 were pre-patched, so they still didn't work. So you really do need like something close to launch day. But
Right.
anyways,
So yeah, Splatoon 3 OLED model version of the Switch is coming out on September 9th, which is that the same day that Splatoon 3 is coming out? I think it is.
I think it is, yeah.
But of course, there's no bundle. So if you buy the Switch, you'll still have to buy the game separately.
So that's almost well, no, that's over $400 then that you'd be spending because it's $350 for the OLED, and then
There you go.
$60 for
it's
the
actually
game.
$360, I think. I think they marked
come
it
on,
like
are
$10.
$360 now?
Are
Oh
you
my
really?
God. The $10
Are you
Well, it's just
even
for the
a-
special edition.
Oh my
But
God.
yeah,
Yeah. And are you even a Splatoon fan if you're not playing on the Splatoon 3 OLED model special edition Switch?
That's
I don't
true.
know.
That's
well, with the Pro Controller too.
Kinda
I
have
don't think
to.
we've mentioned that,
With
but they
the
did
Pro
announce
Controller.
a Splatoon 3
Ooh,
Pro
that
Controller.
controller is clean. I
That's
like
true.
that controller a lot.
You like it? I don't think I like that one as much, personally. But so yeah, that will be available for people who want to buy it. So exciting stuff. All right, let's talk about another game. This one we mentioned a little bit in the past. We haven't talked too much about it yet, which I'm kind of surprised by because, I mean, this is a major Square Enix RPG coming to Switch that we really haven't seen a ton of. This game is called the DioField Chronicle, and it is a brand new RPG by Square Enix. It was actually originally announced back during a PlayStation event earlier this year, but it is coming to Switch, and it is coming in September 22nd, actually. So right around the corner. I think when I mentioned this game in the past, I said it was another HD 2D game, and it's really not. If you go and you look at the trailer, it's much more, I don't want to call it like cinematic, but it's got more like modern aesthetic to it. But what's cool about this game is the combat still kind of takes place from like this isometric like diorama style mode. It's real-time combat, and it looks beautiful. I don't know if they're using any part of the same engine like the HD 2D engine, but I think this game looks awesome. It's yet another massive Square Enix RPG to sink your teeth into.
They've been really killing it lately with just the not only the RPGs, but like their output this year especially has been insane. Like I don't know if you guys have seen like what their forecast for the next couple months is going to be, but wow, I mean, it's just releases on top of releases. It's insane. Like Square Enix, honestly, say what you will about their games, but I would argue they're probably publisher of the year this year, just with the amount of content they're putting out. I mean, it's insane.
I mean, if you're into RPGs, I mean, yeah, you're eating good.
Oh yeah, I mean, Live Alive's around the corner too, so and
Right. Lots of Switch support too.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, that I think is the big takeaway.
Yeah.
Like, we
only took a
haven't
couple
seen
years, but yeah.
like, yeah, there was a little bit of a gap. But they've been making RPGs for the Switch since it came out. Like, because didn't they own like the Tokyo RPG Factory, and they put out
Oh, correct. Yeah, they put
I Am Setsuna.
Yep, and then Lost
That was
Sphere,
like the first one.
as well
Lost
as
Sphere.
I'm not sure if this was
I
Tokyo
am
RPG.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, I Am Setsuna. I'm not sure if this was
Yeah, sorry.
Tokyo RPG Factory, but I know Oninaki was another one.
Yeah,
And that was brilliant.
yes.
Oninaki was beautiful. I loved Oninaki.
Yeah. So have you guys seen the trailer for this game, the DioField Chronicle? What do you guys think about it?
It's very. I did not expect it to be as kind of industrial looking as it was. It's very much like it is still high fantasy, but it takes place in a slightly more modern setting than I guess I would have expected. Still, that's very interesting. The fact that it's real time strategy is neat. It's not something you see super often with these kind of isometric bird's eye view strategy games or strategy RPGs. So that'll definitely
Right.
scratch an itch for some people. Personally, it's not super for me because I'm just not a huge fan of RTS games. but I do think it's definitely a really cool concept and a really cool thing to see being done, and hopefully being done well.
Yeah, it looks like it's not like totally like. I mean, it is real time, but it looks like, you know, when you're making your combat decisions, you kind of pause time.
It's
so
a little bit
they
slower,
call it
yeah.
real time, but yeah, it's kind of like that weird hybrid, which personally I like. Like, I tend to get stressed out with like a lot of like the like real time strategy games, like especially ones that are very focused on defense.
Yeah.
But something like this, I'm like I could see myself getting into this, and I'm really intrigued by the art style. It kind of has, you know, like looking at the character models, like they kind of have like a clay-ish look when they're up close. But I mean that kind of like that diorama angle with the combat is really unique. I really love it.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
In a way, the art style kind of reminds me of a more realistic Bravely Default 2.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah, Bravely Default 2, that art style really did not appeal to me at all, but I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion or not, but yeah, this looks great in my opinion.
See, I was thinking more like, to me, I was getting vibes of Valkyrie Profile with that one. DioField
Right.
Chronicles, but
Which is yet another Square Enix RPG coming out, I think, this
That's
year.
right, yeah.
Valkyrie Elysium.
that's right.
Oh my
That's a new
gosh.
one. Yeah, I'm telling you, they're just like they're killing it. They're doing a great job. Now,
Yeah,
the only unfortunate part
but-
is, you know, all of this is going to perform below expectations. But yeah, no, 'cause that's where they sit now with every single one of their games. But
Right. Regardless of how many it sells.
right, yeah, even at 15 million, yeah, no, still below expectations.
Yeah, unless there's a copy of the DioField Chronicle in every household in America, it is a sales failure.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, Nicholas, do you think you'll be done with Xenoblade 3 in time to play this in September?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay.
Probably not.
Well, you've got some time, so you know we're crossing our fingers for you. Yeah, DioField Chronicle, that is coming out in September. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of games coming to Switch. One game that we have not seen on Switch is F-Zero, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, I'm sure those of you who are super plugged in already saw this, but there was an investor meeting last week, which, you know, not the most exciting thing in the world, but apparently there was a Nintendo fan who spent $40,000 on Nintendo stock, which is apparently what it costs to enter a Nintendo investor, you know, board meeting. It's like the price of like 100 shares. So someone bought 100 shares in Nintendo, and they had an opportunity to ask a question, and they basically asked, "Hey, where's F-Zero?" Which is
Money well spent.
just wonderful.
Reki,
Yeah,
give us
well-
Mother 3.
Pretty much. I mean, there were a couple other franchises I wish he would have asked about. You know, he should have consulted with me first. I might have
course,
been able to, like, I would have slipped him a 20 for him to ask about Kid Icarus. That's an investment. I would have.
Hey man, buy
made,
yourself a
but-
third of a share with this. Here you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's funny because I seem to recall that a few years ago, another question was asked about F-Zero. Maybe I'm mistaken in that, but I'm wondering if it's the same guy that keeps coming back occasionally asking the same question.
I
know
don't
what
know,
time
but
it is.
if so, I mean, that is some dedication right there.
I just imagine this dude walks into the boardroom just and they're just like, oh god, here we go.
Not again.
Yeah. Oh, get ready.
There's just a deep sigh.
There's Mr. F-Zero over there. Just waiting.
Yeah, and for those of you who are curious, the answer was we cannot confirm nor deny whether we are working on F-Zero at the moment. And they said we can't make sequels to every Nintendo franchise ever. It's not realistic. But we're extremely glad and grateful that our fans continue to look forward to them. So yeah, so no real news with that, but it's just funny to me that someone spent that much money. If I had $40,000 lying around, I don't think I'd ask about F-Zero, I will say. But
I mean, you know, it's better than an outright just denial, like, no, it is dead. Screw you.
True.
right. Yeah, no, that's true. At least there's a little bit of hope. And interestingly, someone else in the meeting did chime in, and they're like, well, you know, like, people asked about the Famicom Detective Club remix for a long time, and we couldn't really comment on it. But then we announced it, so he was basically like, "You never know." So I think F-Zero fans can still have some hope that their franchise has not been abandoned, but not too much hope, because that would be not wise.
Yeah, we as you know, per their words, let's be realistic. You know, so
Yeah. So yeah, that was one thing that came up during the meeting that I thought was pretty interesting. The other thing that was kind of important was Nintendo was asked about their working conditions for their employees, which is relevant because we talked about it a little while ago. There was this big story about how Nintendo was treating their contractors, and basically how it was not good, and the contractors were not being treated with the same level of respect and professionalism as the full-time employees. Go listen to that episode of the podcast if you want to hear us talk about it in more depth. But there was a big controversy about it, and the question came up, and they did say that they are trying to improve their benefits for temporary employees. They mentioned some other things, like they're trying to encourage paid vacation and flexible working schedule. Seems like it's not really clear whether this is focused around like the Japanese market or whether they're talking about what's going on in America. That wasn't really super clear. They're trying to get more women involved, which I think is objectively great. They mentioned that back when they started, there were only a few dozen people working at Nintendo. Now there's thousands of people, across the globe working on Nintendo games. So it's a big issue, but sounds like they're at least aware that there's room for improvement, at least.
yeah.
Yeah, from the way they're talking about it, at least it's encouraging. I do wonder in terms of the whole thing with contract workers, how, if that was an issue solely in the American branch, or if they've had a similar problem in Europe or Japan, because I think we only ever heard about that issue in the US. And hopefully this is a step that they're taking towards addressing that as well. Because overall, I mean, obviously they're going to talk about it in a positive light because they want to be seen in a positive light, but they do seem to talk in a way that does encourage good working conditions. So I'm hopeful that, there's going to be actual change derived from this.
Yeah, and it's just, it's one of those things where, like, Japanese companies tend to be very insular. There's not necessarily, as much diversity at like a leadership level as there tends to be more of in Western countries. So any change is a positive change in my book.
I think it's weird when you hear stories like this, because you would think that this isn't something to improve upon because this shouldn't be an issue to begin with, right? Like this is just something that's logical. This shouldn't come down to business. Like, just treat everyone with respect. Now, why is that so difficult? Contract worker or not, if someone is providing labor, for your company, treat them just like anybody else, regardless if they're there for 2 months or 2 years. They're doing something on your behalf and, participating in something that's part of a greater whole, right? So just, thank them for their work, treat them like you would anybody else, and then when they're done with their work, you shake their hand and you go about your separate ways. That's it. Why there needs to be this sort of segregation is beyond me, because then you have problems like this, and all of this could have been avoided if you just treated them like a decent human being. But what do I know? I don't run a company, so
Right. Well, maybe you should, Dennis.
Maybe. But then well, what if that's too I don't know, just too unheard of, Then I don't know.
I think what you should do, Dennis, is you should spend $40,000 on Nintendo shares and go tell them, give them a piece of your mind.
That's a good point, actually.
I think that is the only logical response. Or you could tweet at them. That,
Yeah, but
might be.
Their Twitter's not the most responsive, so it's fan feedback. So
yeah. So yeah, a lot going on at Nintendo investor meetings, apparently. That's where all the juicy gossip happens. They also talked about they are working on some initiatives to deal with information leaks, because apparently, there's a lot of Nintendo leaks. Maybe not as many as some would hope for. I will say. But there was that big Giga leak that happened. Gosh, when was that? That was just like a year or two ago at
Something
this point,
like
right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was, probably not great from Nintendo's perspective, but for people who are very interested in Nintendo's history and how game development works, there was a lot of really interesting information that came out of that leak. So much so that it's still being poured over, and there's still new things coming to light about some of these classic Nintendo games going back to like the NES, SNES era. It's amazing that they kept all this data for so long.
It's a funny thing to think about because, like, from a fan perspective, this is all stuff from years ago, right? Like, it doesn't really necessarily matter to a lot of people, like, oh, this got leaked, whatever, this is stuff from, like, a decade ago. So, obviously, people are going to be welcoming this, like, oh, this is all cool new information, why would Nintendo be so protective of this? Whereas from Nintendo's perspective, it's like, no. No, this is all still private information that we want to keep private.
Right, which is totally their right, but like, how much harm is it really going to do to let people know, hey, Luigi was going to be in Super Mario 64? Is that going to cause people to protest?
Societal collapse.
I don't know, maybe.
Biden has to like go out and make a conference.
L was real.
It could have been. Yeah. So yeah, Nintendo is they are trying to crack down on the leaks. Is basically what they're saying. And I guess I don't blame them, but we need more people to infiltrate and give us all this juicy behind the scenes details.
Yeah.
I think they should just hire, here's my opinion, they should just hire the people from Did You Know Gaming to just be like their communications people, like Nintendo History Department.
True.
That's what we need.
The archivists.
Right, exactly. And it's Nicholas, it's funny that you mentioned societal collapse, because that was another thing that they talked about during the investor meeting. Not quite to that extent, but one of the questions that came up was, what would they do in the event of a natural disaster? And it's, just normal things, but just kind of funny that people are asking these questions.
In the context of like a Japanese company, considering some of the issues that they've had in the past with earthquakes, tsunamis, etc., I can imagine that that's become just a larger priority among Japanese companies to have some kind of thorough disaster response plan. So I think I can understand why that was still something that they touched on.
Right. Yeah, and there have been, there was that tsunami that hit Japan pretty hard over a decade ago. So it's relevant. They have earthquakes and stuff there, but yeah. One of the things though that they mentioned kind of as part of that is they say, they're always making like backups of, everything that's in progress, and they it's part of the reason why they like disperse their operations like out like to some of these places in other parts of the world, different studios and different manufacturers and things like that. So don't worry. If there was a natural disaster, Nintendo will recover, is basically what they're trying to say. So yeah, anytime these investor meetings come up, there's always like a bunch of weird questions that are asked, but it's always interesting to me. I don't know. Maybe it shouldn't be as interesting.
It's like, honestly, it's the weird questions that really are the most interesting to me anyways. So, rather than the usual, what are you looking forward to for, Q4 of the fiscal year? Like, I don't care. Like, but just stuff like that, where it's just like, well, let's talk about the natural disasters. Where's F-Zero? What about that leak? That's the stuff where.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, F-Zero not being out, that's the true natural disaster. They're gonna do F-Zero game.
It's true.
It's the natural disaster that they're not talking about.
Just filled with zeros and ones.
Yeah. So. Hey, this is totally unrelated, but do you guys ever hear that there's this Wii game that never came to the United States? Mm-hmm. It was called Disaster Day of Crisis.
I think it was a Monolith game.
It was a Monolith game. No. Oh my gosh, Dennis. It's a weird one, man. This was a Nintendo first party game that only released in Europe and Japan.
Interesting. Because I know about Disaster Report, but I don't know if this has any relation to that at all.
No, it's not. It was almost like it was a light gun shooter. and you have to like survive all these natural disasters, and you're also battling terrorists and trying to save civilians. It was crazy.
What? Sounds wild.
Yeah, and it's a Monolith Soft game. Yeah.
Was that before Xenoblade Chronicles? I don't remember. I think it must have been.
It came out in 2008. So
yeah, I think that was before, because I think Xenoblade came out in 2009 or 2010.
Yeah, not by much though, which means they were probably working on these games at the same time, which is also just crazy.
You know, trying to find a niche, I guess.
I guess.
Yeah. Did you ever play that game, Nicholas? Because you're over in Europe.
No, I never played it. I just know of it because, it's a Monolith game, so...
Right.
I'm morally required to know about it.
Part of the reason why they didn't bring it over, I guess, was because it was just not... It got pretty average reviews, and that was back at the time when Nintendo was playing it very safe over what they were bringing over. It did get some good reviews, but
meanwhile,
overall,
we got
pretty mixed. But
meanwhile,
but
we got
I just really want to. There you go. Yeah, that's fine. Bring that in. But, yeah. Anyways, totally off topic. Hey, here's another disaster that got avoided recently. The Wii Shop channel and the DSi shop, they're back after being gone for months. Months of downtime.
Societal collapse has been avoided.
Yes, exactly. They're not totally back. I mean, you still can't buy anything. Why would you want to do that on the Wii Shop and DSi shop in 2022?
But at the very least, you're able to re-download your stuff now. Again,
very
right?
much like that.
Yeah.
You can re-download your stuff, and I would advise anyone, man, if you've been waiting to make backups of those Wii and DSi games that you bought and don't have on your system, do it now.
Oh, yeah,
let this be a learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I just did that for my 3DS this past week. I went through and I downloaded every digital game that I was had any interest in replaying, because, God forbid, these shops just shut down with zero warning, which was basically what happened with the Wii Shop channel and the DSi shop. You may not be able to access those games. So, yeah. But they just put it up, they're just like, oh yeah, we were doing maintenance.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
what?
For months?
Yeah, what was happening, really? Because it would have made arguably more sense if they had just gone down permanently. But no, they really just brought them back after several months.
I think they're just
for some reason
at this point. I just feel like, or maybe it's some crazy R&D thing that they're doing where they're just testing, okay, well, people say they didn't want it gone. All right, let's bring it back for a little bit. Let's see if they really use it. And then if not, okay, all right, well, we tried. I don't know.
Yeah, they're like, okay, what will happen if we take these shops offline? Will anyone notice?
Right.
And then everyone noticed.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh shit, I guess we have to bring them back. So yeah, so use this as your opportunity. Please go download your download only Wii and DSi shop games. I'm still sad about it, man. There was some good stuff on there that just is going to be totally lost to time.
Yeah,
I mean,
the Wii
less so for the
especially.
DSi shop, I would say. Yeah, but the Wii had some true exclusives.
Yeah, but again, it's not something that we try to condone because it is technically illegal. But when you don't have an alternative offering, this is why people will always revert to, emulation. So if you want to avoid that, again, make it, when there's no legal option, is the illegal option that's the only option. Where do you draw the line there? You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's weird. So.
And especially
The
when
companies
situations
don't want piracy,
Yeah.
but then they make it so piracy is the only option. for
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
So it's a weird sort of thing that you gotta figure out how to mitigate. I get there's licensing costs and just production costs and server costs and stuff like that. But again, after a point, it's well, what can you do? You can't fault people for taking that route.
Yeah, and it's especially the
and-
case in situations where you have games on the Wii shop that are probably never going to be re-released. That are just very much made for the Wii, and you're probably not going to ever see Switch ports or ports in the future of them because they're very much made for that one moment in time.
Exactly.
So it's hard to like, it's kind of hard to say no. You don't get that. Like,
Yeah, don't do it.
no.
Yeah.
Well, and you can't just expect people to not, want to play Muscle March in the year 2022.
Yeah, like I need that.
You
exactly.
can't. Yeah,
Exactly.
It's essential. Yeah. So, anyways, we'll see how much longer those shops stay up. But yeah, I'm still over here mourning the 3DS and Wii U eShop and trying to prepare for their inevitable shutdown in March next year.
I think those are the most depressing just because that's when it became a staple where anything released physically had a digital counterpart, right? Versus
Right.
before, it was, things on the Wii and the DS were still like 85%, 90% physical with just a small handful of games digital. So, okay, I mean, even though we miss out on the virtual console of the Wii, it'll be fine in the long run, but with the Wii U and 3DS, that's where things really hurt because, again, there's people that, they could have gotten a physical copy of Bravely Default, like myself, but I decided to stay home because my, GameStop or Best Buy, whatever, wasn't open at midnight, but I really wanted to play it, so I went to the 3DS, got it, bam, right at midnight, and then I was playing it, right, in the comfort of my own home. I didn't have to go anywhere. So if I don't have that installed, and I want to play Bravely Default again, well, then apparently, screw me, I guess, according to Nintendo, because, it's too bad. So.
Yeah, it's a much bigger loss for those eventually.
Yeah. The fact that my great grandchildren will not be able to play Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles: My Life as a King is, just really upsetting to me. On the Wii, but times change. All right. Well, we've got one more topic to touch on real quick before we get into what we've been playing, and that is that, hey, E3 might not be dead after all. E3 did not really happen this year. It kind of unofficially happened because there were still like 30 bajillion press conferences, and also Jeff Keighley had his big Summer Games Fest extravaganza.
With plenty of
the actual
sci-fi horror.
Yes, lots of sci-fi horror. And actually, I will give them credit. Some pretty cool
monsters.
indie games. Yeah, there were some cool indie games though, and I actually got to play quite a few of them when I went to Summer Games Fest. So if you guys want to hear about those, go check out on NintendoEverything.com. We wrote a bunch of previews about a lot of upcoming games coming to Switch. Most of them coming this year. So go check that out. But yeah, E3 is scheduled to come back next year in 2023. Which, they did say it was going to come back in some form, but it's not being run by the ESA. It's not, like the ESA, I think they're still involved in planning it. That's the Entertainment Software Association, by the way, for those of you who are out of the loop. But it's actually being run by this group called ReedPop, which basically they host PAX every year. And some other big things like New York Comic Con. So, hey, maybe it won't be as much of a cluster.
Yeah. It's definitely a surprise. Like, it shows that they're really going the extra mile to try and figure out how to revive this. Because E3 has been, we all know it's kind of been not as grand of an experience in recent years, especially because the pandemic brought everything online. And then people started realizing, hey, we don't really need a physical event for all of this because people, like different companies, can just hold their own presentations. But this is like a real step that they're seemingly trying to take to actually change something and try and draw people back in. So I'm very curious what exactly is going to change as a result of this, because all of PAX, Comic-Con, they're all very fan-oriented events. So it makes me wonder if that's kind of the direction they're going to try and go with E3. Is in recent years it had been opened up to just normal fans wanting to get in and try out games, to the dismay of a lot of journalists, from my understanding. But I wonder if they're going to kind of expand on that and really try and turn it into, hey, this is another big like gaming fan convention.
I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, yeah, to your point about like, yeah, because when they opened it up, to the fans, I was actually talking with some folks when I was at Summer Games Fest this year, and that was a media-only event this year. And and it was very kind of intimate, and it was just, you know, journalists and some influencers who were invited. We were all just getting hands-on time with the games. We did interviews. We had appointments for everything, so it was all very organized. And that was kind of how E3 used to be. But when they opened it up to the fans, what I've heard basically is just that it was a total cluster, because the media people couldn't really get the same level of access as they used to, because the publishers were very busy with the fans, and the fans weren't getting the level of access that they expected, because the gaming companies don't necessarily want just everyday fans to have that level of access to the games that they would give to the media. So it was very much like, you know, trying to turn two things into one, and it did not go well. So yeah, that's going to be the big question. I think, you know, personally, I miss E3. I miss when all the gaming news was condensed into like a single week, and I didn't have to like pay attention to like I cannot even tell you how many just like indie showcases there were this summer. It was ridiculous. Like every major news site had one.
Yeah.
There was the Wholesome Games showcase. There was like, and then all these publishers had their own. Like I don't have the bandwidth to keep track of all that, and like that's my job. So.
Yeah, you have Ubisoft having a presentation in September. You have
all the way
Nintendo
in
that
September.
had, you have Nintendo that had their Direct, which turned into a Direct Mini several weeks after everyone else. Like,
right. Well, and that's the other question too. Is like, yeah, I mean, E3 might come back, but yeah, Nintendo's doing their own thing. PlayStation is doing their own thing. Ubisoft is doing their own thing. I mean, so at this point, it feels like it probably would just have to be a fan convention, because all the announcements seem to be happening elsewhere anyways.
Yeah, PlayStation was even doing their own thing when E3 was still up for a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Because they didn't attend E3 for 2019, I think, or 2021.
Which was a huge deal at the time, because it was pretty much just Xbox there at that point.
Yeah, it was just Xbox
in
and
terms
Nintendo.
of the big three. Yeah. Well, and Nintendo, I mean, they were barely on the show floor compared to where they were in previous years.
Yeah, they were a lot more independent. They had like the whole Treehouse segment happening separately and all. Yeah.
I'll never remember that one year when they were like, we are bringing one game to show, and it is Zelda Breath of the Wild, and that is it. We have no other games to talk about at this point in time.
I mean, a heck of a game to bring, though.
I mean, sure, but like, you know, God forbid you want anything else from Nintendo. That was a dark time.
That's all you got. Yeah, take it or leave it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so we'll see. But as we hear more about what next year will look like, we'll let you guys know. Obviously, it's a long ways away, and there's a lot of gaming news that's going to happen in between that time. So, but just an interesting little tidbit. And that's pretty much our show from a news perspective. But before we go, we're going to hop into our last segment, which is what has everyone been playing lately? Dennis, let's start with you. What have you been playing this week?
Yeah, so I've been playing a lot of, the game that I recently reviewed and is up now on NintendoEverything.com. A little game called Eurokill the Calumniation. Calumniation? I always forget that second word.
Calumniation.
Calumniation games. And
Is that a word?
I'm not
No.
sure. I'm not sure. No.
I can't tell you how difficult writing articles on that has been.
Yeah. I was actually thinking the other day that, like, for as much slang that, the English speakers make, I think no one has created more crazy English words than Japanese developers. I feel like
that's very true.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the other day. Was like, what are half of these words? Like, especially when it's a fighting game, melty blood, Ultima Gangu, whatever. I don't know what's happening anymore.
Grand Blue.
Right.
Ooh,
right.
Fantasy versus
Nicholas,
Blaze Blue.
I'm sorry to prove you wrong, Nicholas, but calumniate is actually a word.
Really?
Is it?
Yeah, it means to utter maliciously false statements, charges, or imputations about.
That's actually
Is calumniation a word?
It is. It is a calumniation is a false accusation of an offense or a malicious misrepresentation of someone's words or actions.
Fair enough. That's my bad.
All right. Well,
Dennis, does that fit in the context of this game?
that does actually. That is a perfect. Like, now that I know that, that they couldn't have chosen a better word actually. So, okay. Well, now I feel stupid. Yeah. I mean, that is like
Here
a
you go.
perfect
We're
word.
dropping
Actually.
knowledge bombs on the Nintendo Everything audience.
I'm still going to complain about the English language because that word really should be calumniation and not calumniation.
True.
But
100%.
I agree. I agree.
100%. Yeah.
fair enough.
I'll contact my good friend Merriam-Webster. But Dennis, please tell us more about this game. It looks. My first thought looking at this game was it kind of gives me Danganronpa vibes, but apparently it's also a shmup. As people like to call it.
And that's basically the best way to compare them. I'm gonna try to just give a quick rundown. If anyone who wants the full details, please go to nintendoeverything.com and read the full review there. I go very in depth on it. But yeah, no, it's a visual novel in the style of Danganronpa, and it plays very similarly, in which you have a cast of characters, right, that are. They just wake up and they find themselves there, right? They don't know how they got there or why they're there, except for the fact that there's this crazy host. Now, what would normally be Monokuma is replaced with someone named Binko in this one, and she's this crazy, sort
It's a
of.
very intimidating name.
Yeah, yeah.
Binko.
Binko, yeah.
Tremble with fear.
Well, it's weird too, because every time she says something with like an I-N, she says bin instead, right? So like, she'll say like, you're bin sane, or like you're,
Ooh. I don't like that.
yeah, things like that. Yes. So, but yeah, it's kind of in the same vein, except the art style is very, very different. The illustration is beautiful in this game, and that's one of the things that's the most striking about this game is just the presentation, where everything has some sort of flair to it, some sort of panache and finesse that is like, wow. Like, especially if you own an OLED, oh my lord, do the colors pop in every way possible. It doesn't matter if you're in the menu. You could be looking at options, it doesn't matter. Everything looks so slick. It's fantastic. The dialogue boxes, everything. It's beautiful. But yeah, basically it's a bunch of prisoners that wake up and they find themselves having to go through a sequence of games. And these are all showcased in a sort of aesthetic of like a theme park. So everything looks like a theme park, and it's called Eurokill Land. And yeah, and you're just going from escape room to escape room, and you're kind of doing something similar to Danganronpa, more so than Zero Escape, where you're going to be doing a lot of point and click. You'll look at something that might look a little interesting, like that, get some information in that, maybe get an object, implement that object, into a puzzle, and yeah, and you're just going through a sequence of games doing that. But you play as a prisoner. His name is Sengoku. And you have an executioner. Everybody who's a prisoner has an executioner, and they can choose to kill you at any time they want. They have a little thing called a Eurokill pass. It says kill on it. That's all they can do. Just press that button and just be done with you. But they don't, because they try to basically give you a chance, right, at surviving. Now, you do have to survive the games themselves alongside having to not piss off your executioner, right? So
it would be a pretty short game if they just killed everyone.
right. And to be fair,
the point.
I got a couple of game overs, like soon into it.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I accidentally
Wow.
pissed the executioner off a little bit. But
Oh, that's cool, actually. That makes me more interested, knowing that it's not totally linear. Like, it seems like there's
Right.
multiple endings and.
exactly, yeah, and I go more into detail on that in the review. But yeah, no, multiple sort of pathways. It's more
Alright.
of a dynamic, linear sort of experience, right? So, because it is a visual novel, but those shmups segments are really well done and they're super fun. And the way they're implemented into a game like this is surprisingly engaging. And yeah, if you love stuff like Danganronpa, Zero Escape, Paradise Killer, so on and so forth, those types of mystery thrillers, I mean, look no further, man. This is really, really great. Eurokill the Illumination games. It's a fantastic game. Arguably, I dare I say, it might be one of my favorites of this year, honestly. So,
Wow,
yeah.
that's high praise. I'm glad to hear that you liked it. The only thing, and this is just me nitpicking, but it's the reason I don't play shmups is it drives me crazy that they just do not make shmups that fill the whole screen. They always, there's probably some reason for it, probably something that I'm just missing, but I hate when they like condense the game down into, I'm like, you've got this big, beautiful screen, like use the whole thing.
It is true. It is interesting how and they kind of do a similar thing here where, it is going to be in a sort of 4:3 format, and to make up for the left and the right, where black bars would normally be, because of the letterboxing, you would, you have your main character and the executioner on each side, and yeah, because when you go into those shmup segments, they're in these. You go into what's called BR, so kind of a a little twist on VR, but this is called
Bingo.
brain reality. Yeah, well, that's what I thought at first, but apparently it's just brain reality instead of virtual reality. Because they put you in this little like pod, and yeah, and then you're in there in your mind, and then through those shmups you can eventually sort of quote unquote hack your executioner's brain because you're trying to convince them, right? Like Sengoku is, you find this out right away within the first like couple minutes of playing, but like he doesn't know why he's in jail. He got accused of something a long time ago, but she doesn't believe that he's innocent, right? So he's constantly having to prove to her that he's not lying and like look at this evidence that I have, and but she believes her own thing. So you kind of hack into her brain a little bit and try to, shoot out all the corruption, if you will. But yeah, but no, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you there, Nick. Where it's like that's always been my biggest issue with shmups. Also, is like why do we still have this arcade cabinet looking, format? You have all this screen here, like please let's utilize it,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's nitpicking. I'm glad you like that game. It's definitely on my radar. Nicholas, what have you been playing lately?
I've been playing Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. I have the main campaign of that done, and now I'm just moving through all the post-game stuff and doing some cleanup. Yeah, it's not incredibly long because at the end of the day it is an expansion. It probably took me roughly 10 to 15 hours, I think, to beat the main campaign.
I mean, that's
very fun,
that
though.
is the length of some games. I mean, that's substantial.
Yeah, and that was very much kind of like rushing through, not doing much of the side content. So there's a lot of cleanup left to be done. But overall, it's been really fun. It's a fantastic experience. It addresses a bunch of the issues that people may have had with the base game, and it's just overall very high quality. The final boss was a treat. I really enjoyed it. I'm really glad I managed to at least finish the main campaign before Live Alive and Xenoblade 3 come out, because that would have been very difficult to kind of fit time for otherwise. So now I can just kind of, play that in the background while I wait for Live Alive to come out and just look forward to all of the Xenoblade 3 previews that have been coming out.
Do you think it, and I know this is kind of a subjective question because everyone's different here, but do you think it justifies its price tag? Because the Sunbreak expansion, I mean, it's a full.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pricey.
40,
it's like $40.
Yeah, it's $40, 50 if you get the deluxe edition, although that's just basically cosmetics. I would say yes. I mean, the content of the game is, like, the content of the expansion is very much, I don't know if I would say it exactly doubles the content of the base game, but it provides a lot of extra content, and it's going to get even more content through the different title updates and roadmaps, which are going to provide at least half a year of continuous support. So, I mean, by the end of this, it's already a feature full game that I would say is, pretty content complete. It's going to be getting even more. To me, it's definitely worth the $40. If you already own Base Rise and you enjoy Base Rise, even if you had some problems with it, those might very well have been addressed through the expansion. So
Okay.
I would definitely recommend it to anyone that enjoyed the base game.
Well, awesome. Yeah, I have not played Monster Hunter Rise yet, and I did actually, when I was just looking at the eShop right now, there is a bundle that bundles together Rise and Sunbreak for a little bit of a discount. So I think it brings it down to $80 instead of the $100 you'd be paying at full price for both the game and the expansion. So that might be an option for people who are just now getting into Monster Hunter Rise. No, that's cool. I'm glad you liked it, and I'm glad you were able to get through it in time for Xenoblade.
Yep. We're gonna have to work on Live Alive first before that.
Right. Yeah. Luckily, that one, from what I've heard, is not massive. It seems like it's like a 20 to 30 hour game.
Yeah, that was the SNES version apparently. I'm hoping a bit of an odd hope to have. I'm really hoping the remake doesn't add much content.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's for everything they've indicated says it's going to be a pretty faithful remake. So it doesn't seem like there. I mean, who knows? Maybe there'll be a surprise in there. But well, as far as me, I have been playing quite a few games. But the one I mostly want to talk about is the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series,
Ooh, nice.
which are the remasters of Klonoa 1 and 2. and it is my first time playing Klonoa. I never really had much knowledge of these games back when I was a kid, and they hold up really well. I mean, considering that these were originally PS2 games, or were they PS1 games?
I
I'm not
feel like the
sure.
first
know.
one might have been, but the
First one might have been
the following ones were
Yeah.
definitely PS2. I can't speak 100% to that, but yeah.
Yeah, no, first
1997, so yeah, probably.
Yeah, first Klonoa game was a PS1 game, and the first one got a remake in 2008 for the Wii. This is not a port of that version. It's actually like it seems like all the work they did was based off of the original PS1 and PS2 games. So and the only area where you can really tell that is in the voice acting. The voice tracks are definitely, they have that that old PlayStation era, like that lo-fi kind of sound to them. Like clearly, they were more interested in retaining the original acting than re-recording it.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it kind of charming, to be honest with you. That doesn't really bother me, but the games, I mean, they look great. They put in a lot of work to make these games look modern. The platforming feels a little dated, but not so much to the point where I think it's going to turn people away. It's just that you realize you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely a remaster of an older game. They're not like particularly challenging games, I would say. Probably a little more difficult than like your 3D Mario's, but nothing overwhelming. They're actually 2.5D platformers. So, and I didn't know this going in, but it's really cool. You do a lot of like kind of going back and forth into the background in these games, and which is super ahead of its time considering when these games came out.
Yeah, stuff like that always blows my mind. I think the first time I ever saw something like that was, I want to say in Shantae, like the old Shantae ones, and I was like, oh my god, what? I'm sorry, what just happened? We just went to the foreground here. Like, it just adds another layer of depth that you're not expecting, especially for a game like that.
Yeah. Have either of you guys ever played these games?
I have not personally. They've always been pretty interesting, but I have never had the opportunity to actually get into them until now, I guess.
Well, true, yeah. I remember playing it briefly at a friend's house when they were on PS2. But other than that, I never actually took the time to play them myself. But I always thought they looked wonderful. So I definitely, now that they're kind of revived, I would love to have the opportunity to jump into them again.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and one of the things that surprised me was, and I'll have a full review coming out probably later this week, but there's a really big focus on story, at least in the first game. There's a lot of cutscenes between each stage, and the bosses have quite a bit to say, and it's fairly engaging, I think, for a 3D platformer. There are some like kind of like emotional moments where like, oh, like that got dark actually. Like I'm kind of wasn't expecting that. I don't want to spoil anything for people who are picking it up now, but yeah, I'm having a great time with it, and I think this is just me speculating, but so there's an option when you boot up this game for the first time, and it's basically like asking your permission, like, oh, Bandai Namco wants to collect data on you while you play this game about like how long you play and things like that, and that makes me wonder, like, like Bandai Namco wants to collect data about people who are playing these Klonoa remasters. Like, they must be using this as a way to gauge interest for future games, because I can't imagine any other reason why they would want that data.
I hope so. I think that'd be great, honestly. To really, like you said, just kind of gauge the interest. If people are being as invested into it as they would like for it to be, for them to actually jump in and make a brand new one. I mean, we saw them do it not with Bandai, but we've seen it happen many times before. I think most notably with the Crash trilogy. That sold very well, and then all of a sudden, what, a year and a half, 2 years later, Crash 4 is a thing. For the first time since whatever Crash 3 came out. So PS2. So yeah, long time. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a chance.
Yeah. Well, I definitely recommend if anyone is interested in these types of games or just looking to scratch that 3D platformer itch, definitely check them out. It's a pretty reasonable, I think, like $40 price tag for these games. They're not super long games. I'd say you could probably get through each one in about 6 hours or so, maybe a little bit longer if you fall to your death a lot, like I do. But yeah, they're good games. And that is it. That is our show for the week. Thank you everyone for tuning in to episode 16 of Nintendo Everything Refresh. We really appreciate those of you who have been with us every week from the beginning. As always, please let us know what you think. Drop a comment over on YouTube, or you can reach out to us on the show notes. We're pretty much everywhere at this point. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you can also watch and listen to us on Spotify. And you can also listen to us on pretty much every other podcast platform under the sun, from like Stitcher to Audible to Google Podcasts. I mean, we're everywhere. So yeah, please give us a listen wherever is convenient and spread the word. And we will be back at you next week with everything new and exciting in the world of Nintendo. See you guys later.